Ladies and gentlemen, this video is actually late today because I really had to kind of collect my thoughts on this. I thought to myself, if I actually just create the video as I feel, I'm going to get into trouble because, to be honest, the actual story itself shows just how corrupt and vile and disgusting our government is. Specifically, if you think about it, this is the same government that parrots the crimes of apartheid over and over again. We're told frequently about things like the Sharpeville massacre where 69 people died. Oh, yep, 69. And we're frequently told about all the historical injustices in South Africa, to the point where South Africa repeats historical injustices today to correct the injustices of the past. Now you have to ask yourself a question as to, if South Africa is so principled, why is it that they frequently allow injustices to occur abroad while simultaneously condemning the injustices in another foreign land called Israel? The two-facedness and the disgusting nature of the ANC government is just, for everybody to see in this very topic. And before I get on to the main video of today, can I yet again remind you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. It really takes a lot out of me to make these videos. I mean, this specific story just, well, to be honest, just revolted me because the ANC government is revolting. So what is it that revolted me so much? Well, it's the UN Human Rights Council, the 39th session, which occurred on the 23rd of June, 2026. Now, the Human Rights Council held a special session on the deteriorating human rights situation in Iran. Now, the session focused on Iran's violent suppression of nationwide protests that began on the 28th of December 2025. Now, it's important for you to understand that the reason for this uprising was actually the deteriorating state of Iran's economy. It's nothing more than that. People were fed up of the Ayatollah regime and the way that it was repressing the country to the economic detriment of the average individual. That's why they rioted, no other reason. Now, an Iranian human rights lawyer actually had the following to say about the brutal suppression of the nation. Have a look.
The number increases each day because the killings haven't stopped. We may not know the exact number because of the internet blackout, but by any plausible estimate, this is the worst mass murder in the contemporary history of Iran. Our beautiful country has become a cemetery in which the hopes of our youth are buried. I began my career as a UN human rights officer here in Geneva in 1993 during the war in the former Yugoslavia. I went on to serve as a prosecutor at the International Criminal Tribunal in The Hague. I helped draft the indictment for the Srebrenica and genocide, in which some 8,000 Bosnian Muslims were massacred during July of 1995. By comparison, at least twice that number has been killed in Iran in half the time. This is an extermination. And unlike Bosnia, there is no war between military forces. There is only a war by the Islamic Republic against unarmed youth crying for a better future.
Now, a UN Watch address also occurred on the deteriorating situation in Iran. You can see that here.
Thank you very much. I now recognize United Nations Watch.
Mr. President, doctors in Iran estimate 20,000 protesters killed and 330,000 injured. These are numbers that defy comprehension. These are crimes against humanity. So today's session is welcome, but let's be honest, it is too little and too late. The Iranian people have a right to know why for over 3 weeks did this council say nothing. We asked the 87 UN rights experts, the world's early warning mechanism, for over 2 weeks, why were you silent? Only on January 13th was there a statement, and out of 87 experts, only 5 of you signed it. Day after day, we pleaded for action. 5 days into the repression, after killings of protesters, I asked Agnes Callamard, the former UN rapporteur who now heads Amnesty International, why are you silent? In January 2020, when the US eliminated IRGC terror chief Qasem Soleimani, she rushed within hours to condemn it. Why no urgency when innocent Iranian protesters are massacred? And beyond this room, we ask the media, Hollywood celebrities, campus protesters, those who know how to mobilize world opinion, why are you silent? The answer is uncomfortable but clear. The Iran protest movement shatters a cherished narrative. A people rising against Islamist tyranny does not fit the ideology, and so it is ignored. To all of you, we say the cost of your silence was Iranian lives. It is time to choose. Do everything to protect the people of Iran or your failed worldview. History is watching.
So the idea behind this special session was that a draft resolution called for an urgent investigation into the abuses. Now, it's very difficult to find out what's actually going on in Iran because the internet's been shut down. We have to all remember that. But they've called for an extension of the independent international fact-finding mission on Iran for a further 2 years so they can kind of see what's going on. Now, the reason for this is so that they can get a better understanding as to what the nature of the crackdown and how many individuals have been killed in the suppression of these protests, because it's going to get buried. In fact, news is that Iran has now criminalized talking about the massacres. Yes, it is now a criminal offense in Iran to talk about the massacres that have occurred. Now, the UN Human Rights Council took a vote, and of that, 25 countries said yes. 14 countries abstained and 7 countries said no. Now, the countries that said no included China and Russia. Not really a surprise, right? But the abstainees included Brazil, Egypt, Qatar, Thailand, Ethiopia, and South Africa. Now, there were other countries, but who cares? Now, what is it that the actual resolution was condemning? What is it that the South African government abstained on? Well, the resolution condemned the violent repression of peaceful protests and the mass killing of protesters. Now, we are assured that these suppression of protests and the killing of protesters are the things that caused for the ANC to launch the People's War in order to fight the apartheid government. But the resolution goes further. It says that the arbitrary arrests and detentions are condemned and that enforced disappearances are also condemned. Both of these are things that the ANC government accuses the apartheid government of doing. Now, there has also been suggestions of cruel and inhumane treatments, degrading treatment, and torture of individuals, and the resolution condemned that. Sexual and gender-based violence also condemned, and the use of live ammunition, including against civilians, was condemned. Now, the news came out that the Ayatollah had authorized the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to use live ammunition against protesters and I quote, shoot to kill. Now, finally, the resolution condemned the targeting of journalists, students, women, and minorities. Now, remember, we are frequently told by the ANC government that the targeting of Gaza journalists is a huge crime against humanity, but apparently it's not when you do it in Iran. Now, the statements by the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights said that Iran's violent repression deepened instability in Iran and fuels further human rights violations that will occur in the future. And this comes after the Ayatollah says that he will go around and find everybody who participated and, well, he'll kill them, basically. And they raised concerns about the conflicting Iranian statements on execution of detainees. Now, this came after Donald Trump supposedly had got an agreement that they wouldn't kill protesters, and the Ayatollah said, that's not what I agreed, and I will be killing them. Now, protesters are being labeled as terrorists and foreign agents. Yeah, I wonder where I've heard that foreign agents phrase before. Hey, Julius. And enemies of the state. So let's go to South Africa's abstination. Well, South Africa did not support the resolution. South Africa said that it supports the right of peaceful protest and is disturbed by violence, death, and destruction of property. And South Africa called for maximum restraint by Iranian authorities and that there should be accountability for all perpetrators without naming the regime specifically. Remember, that's the regime who are killing people. And then they claimed that there were external actors allegedly interfering in Iran to destabilize the country. Well, this is specifically a reference to, well, the United States and Israel. So apparently, yes, Cyril is firmly in the camp of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard to the point where he's actually regurgitating their propaganda. Now, the ANC suggested that they supported an independent inquiry that would examine abuses by all So yeah, apparently the protesters are also, in the wrong, and not just by the Iranian state. So that's the ANC's way of actually condemning the protesters. Yeah, I see how this is going. And they argued that the resolution did not sufficiently account for UN Charter principles on sovereignty and non-interference. Yes, okay, so when Israel does stuff in Palestine or in Gaza, they feel the need to take them to the ICJ and to interfere in their sovereignty and to interfere in their country, but they won't do it to one of their allies. This is double standards of the highest order. Now, South Africa objected to the 2-year extension to the fact-finding mission and cited a prior UN HRC rule that stated the country mandate should be 1 year only. South Africa is just not the good guy here. They are not in the right sound mind. Now, the problem is that everybody sees this for what it is. There is growing scrutiny on South Africa's relationship with Iran, and this comes after the recent Iranian naval participation in exercises near South Africa. Now, you know about that if you've watched Morning Shot. So South Africa abstained, and this is now drawing criticism for the government, basically for failing to support an investigation into mass civilian deaths. Remember that the government went around the world condemning the civilian deaths that occurred in South Africa at the hands of the apartheid government, but they don't seem to have the same level of, shall we say, moral standing when it comes through to their allies. But they frequently want to talk about the deaths that are occurring in Gaza, whilst ignoring the deaths at the hands of their funders. This is revolting. The South African government is revolting. So let's actually talk about the death tolls and what exactly the South African government says. Nothing to do with us. Remember that everything else has to do with them, but apparently when it comes through to Iran, they don't care. The Daily Mail reported that, according to Iranian medical and academic sources, that an estimated 33,000 plus protesters have been killed. Now, this is a revision upwards from the previous estimates of 16.5 to 18,000 individuals, and apparently around 97,000 have been wounded. Approximately 30% of injuries involved are damage from security forces, with hundreds reportedly executed following arrest. Now, LBC also reported around allegations of protesters being executed in hospital beds. This is now being raised by the actual hospital authorities themselves, who report that gunshot wounds to the heads at close range are occurring in hospitals. They're coming back to these rooms, they're finding victims in hospital gowns, and they're dead. They've been shot at close range in the head. And there are even claims that some injured protesters who are fleeing hospitals have still been hunted down after fleeing the hospitals and been executed. Now, an Iranian human rights activist cited to LBC that 30,000 plus deaths have been confirmed through hospital and medical networks alone, with a revised wounded up to 350,000 wounded, with 12,000 blinded, with some estimates suggesting that the death toll could be as high as 40 to 80,000 individuals. This far exceeds the massacres that are occurring in Gaza, supposedly. And remember, we're told that that's a genocide. But apparently a genocide by the Iranian government on its own people, its own protesters, well, that's just fine. Now, some other groups have suggested that there have been up to 20,000 arrests, maybe more, with many detainees awaiting possible execution, with allegations of secret trials and extrajudicial executions occurring everywhere, because it's all kangaroo court stuff now. The Ayatollah has been very clear that they can just go around and execute all of these terrorists, and that's exactly what some areas are doing. And I've seen numerous videos, which I can't even put on YouTube because my channel will get taken down, of individuals just driving up to protesters and lobbing their heads off. I've got the videos. There's tons of them. But, as you know, Iran suppressed the internet. And now that there is some connectivity coming down, they've made it a criminal offense for you to tell the rest of the world around the crimes that occurred in Iran. This isn't the good guys, South Africa. Now, commentators have noted the absence of large-scale international protest movements focusing in Iran. There's a lack of widespread campus protests and consumer boycott. Apparently, when it comes through to the Iranian abuses, crickets. Now, the claims that Iran's crackdown has received significantly less global activism and media attention than any other countries, I don't know, Russia, Ukraine, Israel, are, to be frank, factual. And with the ANC government abstaining on just an investigation and saying, please don't kill protesters and innocent individuals, because they have their own sovereignty and procedures, and external interference on their country should be avoided. It's just vile. Because the ANC wanted the rest of the world to interfere in South Africa during the apartheid regime, the ANC has interfered with Israel and their conflict with the Palestinians, Gaza specifically. And here they are, with their handlers, saying, nah, we won't condemn them. It's disgusting. The ANC government is just disgusting. They can sit there and champion human rights all they want. Nothing to do with human rights. These are just terrorist enablers. The ANC are terrorist enablers. They are just vile. But that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Am I over-exaggerating? Am I being a little bit sensitive? I don't know. Let me know what you think. Until next time, bye.